Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Bear with me as this is my first video and my first time filming anything, really. We'll see how this goes. Please be patient with me because I don't know what I'm doing for most of this. The only thing that I have is just a passion for what I'm going to be talking about, which is different histories that your history teacher probably never taught you, and you probably haven't learned about because, well, of different societal reasons that I will be talking about. So for many years I was walking around, probably like you, with the very basic knowledge of US history, and it wasn't until I reached college where I found that there were a lot of voices that are not included in the US history that really are a part of it and really make up our full history. One thing that I would like to mention is that yes, this is going to be kind of a discussion, a dialogue between us, so be sure to use the comments section, but be open and inviting to different voices, okay? Don't be closed-minded, don't be rude, don't be one of those people, okay? Something that we have to all realize is that everybody has different perspectives on different things. Everyone's voices deserve to be heard. For many years, I was with the majority of the United States population of thinking about history in a whitewashed way. For many years I didn't realize how little I actually knew about history, and it wasn't until I reached college when I realized that a lot of the voices that are in our history are mainly there because they're white, or they follow the white narrative. The way that history is taught is whitewashed. It follows the quote-unquote master narrative. All of the voices that are heard in our history are following this idealist society, basically. And it wasn't until college that I realized that there was a lot about history that I didn't know. Thankfully, I'm in this program, the bilingual education program, and I get to hear a lot more voices being heard. I get to learn how to teach it. So, I guess could technically be called a trial run before I get into a classroom, but it could also just be me trying to educate everybody else about how to be anti-racist and anti-biased. So now that I'm getting my teaching degree, I have now realized that teaching is very political. Something that you probably didn't know is that they have political debates about what goes into textbooks, what the standards for teaching are, what curriculum teachers can teach, what even goes into the curriculum. That is all political. In these political debates, they are basically deciding what they want our history to be focused on. Usually, it is focused on making the US look better, making the white American look better. So, welcome to History EDU, where I will be asking the tough questions about history and trying my best to answer them. Now, some of you may ask, why am I only focusing on the US instead of the whole entire world? The simple answer is just because I live in the US, that's where I've lived my whole life, and I don't feel like I have enough experience out in other countries in order to be speaking on their history in an anti-biased and an anti-racist manner. Now, the first topic I'd like to speak on is going back to the basics. What is history? Now, history should be the study of the past as people have perceived it, or it could also be the study of different historical figures as different people have also perceived them. Now, the big focus word here is going to be perceived. What is perception? Everybody has their own different perceptions and different opinions on certain things, so it's only natural that history should have different stories about certain events or certain people based on differing opinions. This is why we have the saying, there are two sides to every story. certain people see certain things in a different light. Now, knowing this about perception, we need to ask ourselves, whose perception are we seeing when we are talking about different histories, or just the history of the US in general? In particular, which perceptions are being told and which voices are being silenced? I hope that through my channel I can help those voices in history be heard and help us spread the word that different perceptions of history are okay. What is anti-racist and anti-biased history? Anti-racist is basically a little part of the anti-biased history overall. Being anti-biased is basically being opposed or prohibiting unfair discrimination based on gender, race, and also religion. Basically, anti-biased history is taking history and seeing what perceptions are being told and how we can change that and make it into a more multicultural, multiracial narrative. Basically, what we want to do is we want to question everything that we learn, everything that we're told, and we always need to remember in the back of our heads who is speaking, why are they speaking, and what voices are being silenced in this narrative. We can do this by critically thinking about all of the things that we've learned. Therefore, anti-racist and anti-biased history is looking at history critically by looking at ways that we can change the white narrative, the whitewashed narrative we have been fed our whole lives, and we can learn the history of those that have been oppressed. Now, we do have a lot of unlearning to do as well, and hopefully by hearing these stories on my channel, I will be helping you along with that. Now, how do you know what you know? Many people learn from textbooks or from their teachers, and as I mentioned earlier, this is a bit of a problem because teaching is political and textbooks in general are political, and whoever is in political power at that moment will be able to change the history or change the narrative that you are learning through your curriculum or through your textbooks based on the standardized tests. Don't even get me started on standardized tests. Now, as a teacher, you have a choice. You can follow the curriculum to the T and not include any of the other voices that are in history or in any other part of society. Or you can take what the curriculum gives you, teach to that, but also add in your own little flair of actually making sure other people's voices are heard. Who tells our histories? The ones that tell our history are the oppressors. Basically, they don't want to give power to any minority groups because they've been in power since colonial times, even before colonial times actually. Like back in England, they were still considered oppressors if you know anything about the Scottish or the Irish history as well. But as I said, I'm not going to go into that because I do not feel comfortable enough to show an anti-racist and an anti-biased viewpoint because I have not been to these countries. Now, back to who tells our stories. You can tell that the oppressors are the ones telling our history because, for example, you have probably never heard of the Young Lords of Puerto Rico, the Native American boarding schools, or any of the Mexican American histories that I will also be talking about. So why are they only telling certain parts of history? Why not the whole part? Certain points in history are deemed more important by our government and political figures because, sadly, the truth is they choose the points in history that they feel will make the U.S. look better, or that they think will make the U.S. white American feel better about their past, about what their ancestors did to certain people, certain oppressed groups, minority groups, in terms of slavery, in terms of taking the indigenous people's land. And because of this, all other people's voices are drowned out. All of the other groups' perspectives are drowned out. They're not told. And I think that this needs to change. Which voices go unheard in our history? Now, specifically, sadly, I can't tell you all of them because there are just way too many, and hopefully I'll be able to talk a little bit on each of them in my videos later on and spread some of their stories. But basically all of the voices of the oppressed are the ones that are not being heard and not being told in our history, and they're not being taught in our schools. Now, from the beginning, this land was multiracial and multicultural. So why isn't it taught that way? Why don't we learn it that way? Why do we have to keep those voices oppressed, keep those voices unheard? In order to know our full history, we need to know all of the voices. We need to hear them all. We need to know all of the perspectives of different stories, and just in general, we need to know our past in order to know where we're going in our future. This means that voices from every group, that perspectives and opinions from every group must be valued. And I believe that we must understand our past in order to fully understand and change our future as a nation. For this reason, we need to learn how to think critically about who is speaking, why they are speaking, and we also need to think about which voices go unheard and why. So that's my challenge to you. Every time you hear something about history, something about a different race even, or another gender, I want you to think about who is speaking, what their opinions are, and then think about it in terms of all of those questions that I had just mentioned. Who is speaking? Why are they speaking? And think about it in terms of another perspective. Even as we go on this learning journey together, I hope that we can all keep these questions in mind while we learn and unlearn certain things about our past. Now, next week, as I mentioned, I will be making a video about the master narrative or the dominant narrative and what that means, because that is something that is very important in terms of anti-bias, anti-racist education, and in order to talk about an anti-racist, anti-bias history, you will need to know about it. So I hope to see you next week. But until then, don't forget to comment down below, because this is meant to be a discussion. Don't forget to subscribe in order to see my next video. Remember to stay open and think critically about different stories that you hear. So thanks for sticking around. Bye! You know, my brain isn't working today. None of this is making sense, and there's gonna be so many jumps and pauses because I'm gonna be editing so much. Okay, I can get on tangents really easily with this stuff. Okay,